More flexibility in exchange for high levels of accountability. This is the idea at the heart of the 1992 law that created charter schools, a new type of independently run public school. These new schools would provide diverse and innovative options to students who weren't being well served in the traditional system.
Parents were afraid of schools that were not held to a high enough standard, that they were unwilling to send their kids to an unsafe environment and an environment where they weren't going to be on the path to college. And so we exist as an alternative to that.
We knew that in exchange for this autonomy, there would be a certain level of accountability.
Charter schools are held accountable in multiple ways: by parents who choose whether or not to enroll their children in the school, by authorizers, usually local school boards, that decide whether to approve new charters and whether to renew existing ones, and by their own boards of directors who guide the leadership of the schools. Many charter schools are providing an extraordinary education, but too many charter schools aren't achieving at the levels they should be.
Accountability means holding ourselves to high expectations and for the best interest of our students. So it means making sure that the product that we're putting forward for our kids is exceptional, or is as close to exceptional as we can get, and it means holding ourselves to that standard and holding one another to that standard.
Accountability to me is fulfilling our mission of getting our kids to graduate from college.
The accountability is really tied to the Charter Schools Act of 1992, where there was a much higher level of scrutiny put upon charter school finances and charter school test scores. And so all these years later, 20 years to be in fact, there should be a much higher level of accountability placed upon us to ensure that we meet the promise of the Charter School Act of 1992.
Currently, charter schools are overrepresented in the top 10% of California's public schools, a great cause for celebration. However, they're also overrepresented in the bottom 10%. In 2009, CCSA started doing intensive work with our members to develop an accountability framework for schools. This framework looks at 3 important measures: overall performance of the school, whether the school is improving, and how the school compares to other schools that serve similar students.
I remember when I was on the member council like 5-6 years ago that we were having these conversations, and it was a very inclusive dialogue. We had representatives from across the state and across school models that were engaging in this process and really unpacking what this meant for the charter movement.
It's not just about providing choice to parents and students. That's extremely important. It's got to be high quality choice. And if we as a movement, as member schools, aren't ready to and willing to embrace that, we can't expect anyone else to do it.
It's important that we lead the accountability charge for 2 reasons. One, we don't necessarily want others to be holding us accountable in ways that we're not comfortable with or don't agree with. Worse than that is the possibility that no one holds us accountable for the work that we're doing. That we are allowed to slip off into mediocrity or worse, and that we become the same system that we were brought into existence to replace.
Anyone who hopes to open a new charter school writes a petition. This is a detailed plan for how they'll run the school. It's also a promise to the community about what they'll offer to students. Every 5 years, the charter school's authorizer looks at whether the school is fulfilling that promise and decides whether or not to renew the school. In 2011, CCSA publicly called for the non-renewal of chronically low-performing charter schools. This may seem surprising. However, we believe that the charter school community should lead the way on accountability, and that CCSA is uniquely positioned to do so. Ultimately, a small number of chronically underperforming charters endanger the legislative and policy environment for all charter schools.
For the first 10 years of our movement, it was about providing choice and opportunity and innovation, and it was much needed as a movement and for the movement. That we know that for us to make the kind of change that needs to be provided for students across the state, that we as members have to stand up for the highest quality schools and programs for students.
All public schools, both charter and traditional, should be held to a high bar, and policymakers, educators, and the public continue to debate how they should be measured and held accountable. CCSA is making sure charter schools have a seat at the table in those critical discussions. If we don't lead this work, others will impose new standards that don't accurately measure the impact of charters or respect charter school autonomy. In 2012, CCSA stood with the National Association of Charter School Authorizers as they took the call for accountability nationwide. The association called for the closure of low-performing charter schools and the replication and growth of successful charters to give more students access to a great public education.
The surest thing that we can do to stop our progress is to lower expectations and to lower standards. And the fastest way to grow further and faster and better is to raise the bar.
In this new phase of ed reform, it's particularly now charter schools holding other charter schools accountable, I'm happy to be a part of that.